Hey everyone, Vincenzo Calla here, and welcome to episode 23 of Let's Discuss Politics. Today, I'm glad to be joined by Bobbi Ann Brady, the MPP for Haldimand, Norfolk. Bobbi Ann was elected as the MPP for Haldimand, Norfolk in the 2022 election. In doing so, she was the first independent MPP elected without being previously elected as a main party since 1905. Bobbi Ann is also the first female independent MPP elected in Ontario's history. Bobbi Ann was born and raised in Haldimand, Norfolk, and prior to being elected, she was the executive assistant to the former Haldimand, Norfolk MPP, Toby Barrett, for 23 years. Thank you, Bobbi Ann, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you here, and let's get this interview started.
Let's go.
Our first segment is called Bobbi Ann's Story, where we'll talk about Bobbi Ann's political history. So I wanted to ask you to start off, when did you first get involved in politics?
Well, I was a reporter prior to becoming involved in politics. So I graduated from broadcast journalism and I worked in newspaper, radio, and television for about 4 years. And it was when I was the editor of a small town newspaper that the local MPP's office, Toby Barrett's office, was advertising for a constituency assistant. And my mom found this ad in the paper and she said, "Oh, you should apply for this." I said, "Oh, well, I don't think I qualify." And she encouraged me to apply anyway. And I went through quite a rigorous interview process back then. I think I went through 4 interviews, and Toby knew me obviously from me being on the campaign trail as a reporter and covering local political issues. And he quite liked, the way I reported and my honesty. And so at the end of the day, he hired me, and I was his constituency assistant for a brief time. Then I moved on to becoming his legislative assistant and was commuting back and forth to Toronto, doing policy work. And shortly thereafter, I became his executive assistant. And that's where you kind of do the jack of all trades in politics as the executive assistant. And absolutely loved my time as Toby's executive assistant. I was with him for over 23 years. And in that time, I was roped into becoming the local PC Riding Association president. And I held that position for over 20 years, largely because everyone wants to belong to a board, but nobody really wants to take on the role as president. So I was the president for over 20 years and loved doing fundraisers and got to know our community inside and out. And that set me up really well. Kind of the succession plan, Toby's idea after, kind of seeing me in action for a few years was that, this was a good succession plan, that if I wanted a career in politics, this was a good thing. So, he groomed me, and I couldn't have had a better mentor than Toby Barrett. He's an honest, upright guy and always does the right thing. And so I was well trained by him. And that's how I got involved.
So I wanted to move on now to when you decided to run this year. So I wanted to ask you, why did you decide to run for this position, and especially independent? Why did you decide to go for it as the independent?
So there's a bit of a backstory here. Back in January, I'd say I started going to the party, the Ontario PC party, as the local president, saying, when are we going to have a nomination night? And I was told we had to wait. And at that time, it made sense because, COVID was rearing its ugly head again for, whatever wave we were in at that time. And I said, okay, I get it. And, February comes along and I ask again, and I'm still told to wait. March came along and I said to Toby, I said, something's going on here. This doesn't make sense. And so Toby ended up, I think it was the beginning of April, making a call to the premier saying, like, what's going on? Bobbi Ann's been asking for, a date for a nomination night. Keep in mind, the nomination nights in this day and age are approved by the party. You can't just go out and do them like you did 20, 25 years ago as an association. So the premier said to Toby, "Oh, let me look into this and I'll get back to you." And so he got back to Toby, and it was Saturday, April 9th. I remember the day very well because I had cooked all day, my mom's birthday dinner, and we were just about to sit down to dinner. And my phone rang, and it was Toby. And Toby said to me, "The premier is not going to allow you to run in a nomination. In fact, he's appointing the mayor of Haldimand County." Needless to say, my mom's birthday dinner was destroyed. And, I spent the Sunday reflecting on how we got here. And there were warning signs. I saw the warning signs along the way, and I would call them out, but I was told, I was being paranoid. But things evolved to the point where, we, on the Sunday, Toby and I had some really difficult discussions, and we decided it was time to go back to the premier and say, no, you know what? We can't condone the candidate that you've appointed because we don't see him as a conservative. He had never purchased a membership. He had never been to one of our events. He was never supportive of us. In fact, 3 weeks prior to his appointment, he was on social media, saying terrible things about the government and about Toby Barrett. So we didn't recognize him as a conservative, so we certainly couldn't condone it. So we said to the premier, if you believe in your candidate so much, then let him run in a nomination night. Anyone who wants to throw their hat in the ring, including Bobbi Ann Brady, should be able to do so. And we were denied the nomination. So a few days went by, and it didn't take me long. I think on the Saturday night, April 9th, I had decided already that if the horse was not going to be put back in the barn, that I was going to run as an independent. So I think it was the Wednesday, after many days of crying, tears of anger and frustration and sadness, and feelings of betrayal, traveling the province for over 20 years, ruining vehicles, giving of my time, and on my own dime. I felt betrayed, and Toby felt betrayed. But anyway, on the Wednesday, I walked into Toby's office and I said, "I know what I'm going to do." And he says, "I was afraid you were going to come and tell me this." And he says, "Well, let me hear it. Like, let's hear it from your mouth." I said, "Well, I'm going to challenge this, and I'm going to run as an independent." And I think Toby said something to the effect of, "Are you crazy?" And I said I might be crazy, but I said it's the right thing to do. I feel that the people of Haldimand, Norfolk are being saddled with a bad deal, and I'm not about to let that happen without a fight.
And very quickly, I followed the campaign very closely. Tell me about the bananas.
Oh, the banana story is the one that I just wish would go away, but I think because I like monkeys, I really love monkeys, and it's just too bad that the monkey is part of the story. But anyway, so when people in the party who are my friends, and keep in mind, I'm not disheartened with everyone at the party. They're very in the party. This was a decision made, I think, by one or two key people who had ulterior motives. Anyway, regardless of these good people, I was told that running as an independent was a really bad idea, and I should just go away for 4 years and forget about it. And I said, "Well, why would I do that? It doesn't seem like the right thing to do. You guys are trying to saddle us with a bad deal here." And they said, "Well, the truth of it is, Bobbi Ann, is that we could run a monkey in Haldimand, Norfolk, as long as it has a PC logo on its back." And so the banana is for the monkey. That statement to me was very disrespectful. It wasn't disrespectful to only Toby and I. It was disrespectful to the entire Haldimand, Norfolk electorate, saying, we could run a monkey and still win. It basically insinuated that the people down here, don't have the courage to make their own decisions, and they sure proved that wrong.
So let's go on now to serving your elected your community as an elected official, this community that elected you as an independent, and we'll talk about your hopes as a newly elected official as well. So first off, what's your favorite part about Haldimand, Norfolk?
It's the people. We have incredible people here with a very strong work ethic. And that strong work ethic, I think, sets them up for all sorts of other wonderful qualities like loyalty. And they have stood behind me, from the time I announced. And they continue to be proud of the work that I do today. And, I've got to tell you that the people of Haldimand, Norfolk, when you look at what they did in this election, it is a testament to the type of people they are. Everyone is told never go to the ballot box and choose an independent. I mean, you said it at the outset, 1905. And, elections would have been very, very different in 1905 than they are in 2022. For the people of Haldimand, Norfolk to go to that ballot box and choose the independent that they were told never ever to choose, takes a lot of courage. And that's just, I can't say enough about the people of Haldimand, Norfolk. These are the same people who every single weekend throughout the year have events. I mean, we don't have to leave Haldimand, Norfolk in order to have a good time. There's something going on every weekend in multiple small towns across Haldimand, Norfolk. And sometimes these events are not just 1-day events, they're, 2-3-day events. Or I just finished the Norfolk County Fair, which was a 7-day event. And, that just speaks to the work ethic and the community mindedness of all the people here. So, yeah, my favorite part is the people, and they have a great deal of knowledge. Our farmers, for example, some of the most ingenuitive people that I know, some of the brightest people that I know, they know how to solve problems. They know how to survive. And yeah, I'm just so proud of them.
And I wanted to ask you now, you ran as an independent, you put forward your own platform, which doesn't happen often because usually the candidates that run for parties run on the party's platform, but you had your own platform. And I want to ask you now what you hope to achieve as the MPP in the next 4 years and what platform you want to sort of work on throughout the next few years.
Sure. So I do have some goals. First and foremost, politically, one of my goals, and I'm not saying that this is my top priority, it's kind of a sidebar type issue that I'm going to work on simultaneously with my policy ideas, but I want to work with all the parties and speak to all my colleagues on all sides of the House in order to restore respect to our major political parties. What happened in the PC party is not unique just to the PC party with what happened in Haldimand, Norfolk. It's rampant through all the political parties. And there is a culture of disrespect. There's a culture of you do as I say, and the grassroots no longer matters. So I want to work with my colleagues in all the parties and try to restore that respect. We can't just take voters for granted that they're going to raise money for a political party and they're going to go to the ballot box and do as we say. So that's kind of a sidebar thing that I will work on simultaneously. Policy-wise, I campaigned on a few ideas. So number one, I'm very concerned about the amount of agricultural land that is being taken up for development across this province. 319 plus acres every single day is being lost to development. And if there's one thing that we can't create more of in this province or in this world is land. So 319 plus acres, people say, oh, Bobbi Ann, you're being dramatic because not all of that is productive farmland. Well, I could argue, but it is land. And it's unsustainable to continue to pave over land at that rate. And if the pandemic taught us one thing, it's that we want things made close to home. And if there's one thing that I would really like to ensure that's made close to home, it's our food. And if we need to start importing more food because we're paving over land, we're in big trouble because other countries will be able to charge us whatever they like and we will have to pay. And I know that sounds dramatic, but It is the truth. I see developers in my 23-year career with Toby. I don't think we had a meeting with a developer up until about the beginning of 2022. And 2022 came along, and all of a sudden developers were lined up at our door, and they were showing up when I told them not to show up. Hey, I'm busy today. I'm doing year-end numbers. And they still showed up demanding to meet. That's a problem. It's also a problem that they pit farmer against farmer. I have neighbors who, say, no, my land is to be used for food production. And they get angry with the neighbor down the road who, sells out to a developer to pave over their land. So it's a bit of a toxic environment when you start pitting neighbor against neighbor and offering, one money to pave over things and the other believes in producing food. I would like to call for an all-party committee to look at agricultural and outdoor issues on a whole. I won't go into too much of that because I will be bringing that forward very, very soon. I can't imagine that anybody is going to see that idea as a bad idea. I listened to the throne speech, and the government talks about needing 1.5 million homes over the next 10 years. They call it a building crisis, and yet our healthcare situation is a situation. And in my mind, those things should be reversed. It should be a healthcare crisis and a building situation. When I listened to the throne speech and I heard these things, and then I heard, the idea that people coming into Canada are eager to make Ontario home. That's a good thought. That makes us feel good as Ontarians for sure. But you just said that we have a healthcare situation and a housing crisis. So I'm not sure why we would continue to bring people to a province that is not really set up to bring more people into it. So I want to work on preserving our farmland, encouraging government to develop where infrastructure already exists. I see developments proposed in our area where infrastructure is not in place. That's not moderate. That's not responsible growth. So those are a few of the key things. The other one that I would like to speak about is ODSP. Social services in general needs to be overhauled. Years ago, Toby worked on a white paper, and I was part of the research on that white paper. And one of the things I discovered is that there are folks on ODSP, who are treated very poorly, and they're there through no fault of their own. And yet, their asset levels are kept very low. They can't really own anything. There's no incentive for them to go out and work. Just because you're on ODSP doesn't mean you can't work. There are people who have come to me who have said, hey, Bobbi Ann, I can't work 40 hours a week, but my disability would allow me to work 15 or 20 hours a week. We should be encouraging that. Instead, government is disincentivizing work by saying, hey, you know what? If you go work those 15 to 20 hours, we're going to claw back the majority of what you earn. We have a labor shortage in this province right now. I see it all over. Every little small town I drive through, there are signs everywhere that say help wanted, help wanted. And yet, those are jobs that you could be filling with people who could work 15 to 20 hours a week. And yet we're not allowing that to happen. So I want to encourage government to, start incentivizing work instead of paying people, just to sit home, because everybody knows, how fulfilled you feel when you're actually a contributor. And people on ODSP say to me, I want to be a contributor, but it actually costs me more to be a contributor.
Finally, let's go on to the next segment, where I'm sure we'll continue on those points in the second question of this segment. And it's called Politics Are All Around Us, and we'll talk about politics and the world around us. So first off, you've already touched on this. So who is or who was another politician that inspires you? And maybe how did Toby inspire you?
So yeah, I would say first and foremost, Toby is probably the politician who inspired me the most. He was just different. When I started working for him and I started working at Queen's Park, I realized that I was working for someone pretty special and, completely unflappable and, never lost his cool. Um, Very patient, very kind, and always professional with everyone around him. And I don't always see that with politicians at Queen's Park, but Toby's just an honest guy who always did the right thing. And he even fought for things that were unpopular. Tobacco farming is still very big in Norfolk County. And of course, that's not a sexy issue when you get to Toronto. I mean, everyone, demonizes the industry. At the end of the day, it's still a legal industry. And, Toby would stand up for that, stand up for our tobacco farmers. We have the largest coal fire plant in our riding as well, and they called Toby at Queen's Park. Oh gosh, they had a name for him, Dirty Coal or something like that, and he still stood by that. He said, no, they are doing pollution abatement. They're putting scrubbers on the stacks and all of these things, and this provides all these jobs for our area. And he stood up for things that may have been unpopular downtown Toronto, but were very important to our riding. He was a company man. He did, listen to his party, but he also found a way to distinctly represent the people of Haldimand, Norfolk, in a way that was unique to him and unique to our riding. So he really was, he is my political idol. I do have others. I grew up hearing how wonderful Margaret Thatcher was, and not because she was a woman. I don't really believe in separating men and women and saying that I believe because of this, but she ruled with that iron fist, and I think that's a good thing. And I similarly, there's people who talk about Mike Harris. And Mike Harris was the premier, at the beginning of my career. And love or hate Mike Harris did exactly what he said he would do. And I think that's admirable, right? Even if people don't agree with you, be true to your word. And of course, I continually quote Winston Churchill. Anything I can get my hands on from Winston Churchill. The thing that I learned about Winston Churchill is that, he never stood up and spoke publicly without going over his speech and writing and rewriting. And it's something that I am trying to do as well. So I write all my own speeches, and I take great pride in them. And I think that's what I've learned from Winston Churchill.
And finally, I wanted to ask, and I know that you brought up a couple of them, but what's an issue that you think needs to be focused on more just in general by everybody? What should be focused on more?
Yeah, so I have a newspaper column that's coming out next week. I switched my newspaper column this week to tell folks to make sure they look well to their municipal vote, because I have huge concerns with Bill 3, the Strong Mayor's Bill. I worry about that. But in my column that will be released next week, I talk about the idea that, Mike Harris used to say, we can't be all things to all people all the time. And, Ontario is at a crossroads. We are in crisis mode. We have the healthcare. I will use the proper terminology. We have a healthcare crisis. We have an education crisis, I believe, as well. And these things are never. And I'm not saying that this was created by the current government, because, I watched for 23 years, healthcare and education. Is anybody ever happy with the government of the day on those two files? Not a chance. Every government, takes their hits on those two files, regardless of how well they're performing. So we've gotten to a point in Ontario that we are at a crossroads, and it didn't happen overnight. It's not this government's fault. It's everyone's fault. And I think it's time that Ontario takes stock and they look at what the priorities should be for Ontarians. And, maybe there's things that we shouldn't be funding, and maybe some of that money needs to go into priority services like healthcare and education. But at the end of the day, we continue to throw more money annually at each of those files, and yet things don't get better. In fact, we're seeing regression at this point in time. So we need to take stock of what's happening. Home care is another one that really troubles me. On the campaign trail, I would knock on the door of seniors who had just been released from hospital, and you know, they're crying to me that their home care you know, never shows up, their PSW never shows up. I'm doing a lot of work locally on trying to figure out what is actually going on in home care, and I think I do have it figured out, and it's mismanagement. You know, we talk about staffing shortages. I'm not certain that those staffing shortages really exist in the system, or if they are truly the problem. So I'm working on that. It's time to take stock of where we're at, because we can't continue to throw more and more money at problem areas without the results. You know, we can't afford it. You and I, as the taxpayer, can't continue to afford that. So I think government has a serious job of sitting down, rolling up its sleeves and saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Taxpayer, we are going to have to, you know, do this, this, and this. I will say that in the private sector, if you find ways of doing things more, you know, doing more with less, they're called efficiencies. In the public sector, they're given the bad name of cuts.
That is all for today. Thank you, Bobbi Ann, so much for joining me.
No problem. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. These were great questions.
Well, it was great to have you. And if the viewers like today's interview, go watch the other interview with Bobbi Ann for Top 10 on Instagram. If you're watching this at the date that it's coming out, it'll be on Friday. So to stay updated, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at BC Productions 25. Check out VincenzoCalla.com. Make sure to like, subscribe, and choose to get notifications here on YouTube. Let's Discuss Politics is a VCalla production. So until the next video, I'm Vincenzo Calla, signing out.